What's up, and welcome to another episode of the KopiBros show presented by Chit Podcast Network. Now, today, we had the very, very engaging and fun experience of talking to Dr. Loretta Chen. Amongst many things that she do, is a technopreneur, runs Smobler, a former media person, was also in theatre, also academia. And let me just say that it was such a pleasure talking to her because of how engaging she is, how frank she is. Felt that it's such a refreshing, guest to have, very engaging, talks about so many different things that I thought that will be interesting to listen in on. Okay, so without further ado, before we get into our episode, a word from our sponsor.
And we're going to take a quick break in the podcast to thank our friends at CityMusic, one of Singapore's true pioneer in the music space. CityMusic has long been known as a go-to destination for musical instruments, but they've also been making big headway in audio and video equipment, especially for creators and podcasters. From guitars and pianos to audio interfaces, microphones, and even video recording equipment, CityMusic is true one-stop shop for everything music and content creation related, with options for every budget.
In fact, the audio you're hearing right now is recorded using the Zoom ZD-M1 mic, an amazing broadcast-style microphone that delivers professional quality sound on par with other big-name podcast mics, but at nearly half the price. It's proof that you don't have to overspend to sound great. A huge thank you to our friends at CityMusic, not just for this awesome giveaway, but for being a pioneer in the music space and for making sure creators, musicians, and podcasters always have the right equipment for whatever budget and setup they want.
CityMusic,
powering your sound, your music, and your content.
And now, back to the episode. Now, our guest today is a Singaporean creative producer, theatre director, professor, and technopreneur, as well as founder and CEO of Smobler, a frontier technology lab working at the intersection of educational gaming, blockchain infrastructure, and AI. Now, in addition, she has led technology and creative initiatives with governments, global brands, and international institutions across the world while teaching leadership and entrepreneurship at universities. Also, the author of the upcoming book, Grit and Grace by Penguin Random House. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Loretta Chen. Hello, Dr. Chen.
Hello, Jin-Yong. Sorry, that's such a mouthful, but thank you for that very warm introduction. Wow, I even have my coffee cup. Since I know that I'm coming to KopiBros, so I have my
Thank you.
kopi all here.
I normally do the introductions better, but I don't know why today I'm stumbling.
I mean, I hope I put some pressure on you. I have the effect on people. I scare you with it.
Okay, so actually, interestingly, right, before we get into the interview, I don't know why when I was researching for guests to be on, right, I didn't know why your name sounded so familiar. Then after doing research, right, I realized why. Because when I took I took Chinese course in NTU. So I think one of our professors is Dr. Kwa Sai-ren. I don't know whether you heard of him before.
Yes.
So one of his texts that he had us read was the Chinese version of the vagina locks called 阴道独白. Then we had to talk about what is the vaginal monologues, then the Singapore version of the vaginal lock. And then I realized that you were the director for one of these pieces. Then I'm like, oh, okay, this is coming full circle now.
Oh, wow. And I guess this is a perfect way. I mean, this is not even scripted, but it's a perfect coming together also because it's International Women's Day. So that can be an even better way to start that you were researching on me and then that to 阴道独白. But yeah, I think it also is a start of a very frank and interesting conversation. If the first few words we utter is 阴道独白, so this is going to be an exciting chat. I'm so excited to be on this podcast. I mean, I was just sharing with you offline that, being a Singaporean that lives in diaspora and, Hawaii, one of the most isolated land masses in the world, it's always very heartwarming when one of our local KopiBros reaches out for an interview because it makes me feel that, I still have connection to Singapore. You can take the girl out of Singapore, but you can't take Singapore out of the girl. My heart beats with you. That's why I'm even in our national colours. Yeah. So.
Wow, I should change already. I shouldn't be wearing a green shirt.
Ask your producer to edit a little bit.
Yeah. So what have you been busy with, Dr. Chen?
Actually, quite a few things. I mean, as you probably figured out, I aside from all the things that you've read out, thank you, I also have 16 pets. So I also am a fur mama, always very busy. Jokes aside, it's always exciting. There's no boring day in a day of an entrepreneur's life. So basically, I am, while being an entrepreneur, which I'll tell you about, I just wrapped a semester with the University of Maryland because they've actually asked me to be associate professor at their innovations and entrepreneurship program on the military base. So it's really exciting for me to also be part of this landmark project. Specifically for Smobler, we are, as you've read up, right? I think we are a technology builder. So we largely are building on educational games. We'll be launching a new financial literacy game in May. You can ask me all about that later. So we're really excited about that launch. Yeah, in Vegas. We're working on blockchain infrastructure, specifically working on maritime bunker trade. So we're working quite closely with the maritime port authorities as well as with a big bunker corporations in Singapore and the region to put digital bunker on chain. Right now, really busy with obviously AI. We've just completed a landmark project with the state of Hawaii where we built a food AI or RegTech project to help in the regulatory compliance in food security and compliance. So we built a food AI platform for the state of Hawaii. And now we are looking to, when I say we, I mean Smobler, we're looking to commercialize it. And I'm partnering with Singapore companies to see how we can take this food AI platform and launch it in a bigger way in Singapore and the region. So as if that's not enough, also writing a book with Penguin Random House called Grit and Grace to feature all these power women, 晕到独白, all these power women in Southeast Asia.
I see.
I think it's the right time to do something like that. Yes.
So before we get into the interview, right? Normally for guests that come on, I have 1 or 2 words to describe them. What content creator. This guy runs a cleaning company. But for you, right? I want to ask you how when people ask you what do you do, how do you explain like what's the keywords that you explain that this is what I do?
Yeah, that's true. How much time have you got, man? But no, I think but jokes aside, I one of my really good friends, he runs one of the biggest cleaning companies in Singapore, obviously very established, also doing very well financially, but he's very humble. So you ask him what he does, he said, I clean toilet. But, he actually, has got one of the biggest accounts cleaning all our, from our airports to our malls, to a lot of, But anyway, so I guess these days I say I'm fundamentally still an educator and entrepreneur, but specifically, I think a very good way, a poetic way of saying it would be that I built bridges between creativity, technology, society, and community. Because I started my background, as you know, right? 引导独白, but in the theatre and the media. So communication skills, connecting, creativity is really the heart of who I am, really about telling human stories. Really what you do, right? We share stories, you tell human stories. Later on, when I became a director, it was telling stories, other people's stories through a theatre platform. And then, when I joined my brother's company, our family business, we design and build retail stores. We do a lot of events. It is telling brand stories. And then later on, when I started Smobler, it was telling stories, but using a technological platform, right? Whether it was through gaming on Roblox or, through blockchain or through AI. These are all ways to better connect us. I fundamentally say I do the same thing. I create, I connect, I communicate, but the packaging and the form it takes has evolved through time. So basically you can say I'm a connector, a creator,
and a storyteller.
And communicate. And a storyteller. That's a nice word. And a storyteller.
Nowadays, there's always this thing about like AI is taking over jobs and whatnot. But I always tell people that, let's not forget that at the core of AI is human and humanity and the human condition, right? So certain things will never go out of like touch on like communication, people to people, how to get messages across. I feel that these are still skills that you need, even though AI can progress until they take over. I
agree. And in fact, even more, I was just having this conversation today with the head of wellness in one of our big hospitals here in Hawaii. And I was just saying that it's true. In fact, because AI is taking such precedence, all the more the human connection is really important, right? Because it is true. A lot of very mundane tasks, even for myself as a business owner, a lot of mundane tasks can be taken now by AI. So all the more you value this connection, because this has become, like it's exciting, it's challenging, it's fun. You want to meet people. Coming out of COVID, we realized that a human connection is still fundamentally really, really powerful. I think that's one of the reasons why, even out of COVID, right, we thought that the world would drastically change. And yes, while there's now hybrid work, remote work, podcasting, right, and the landscape has changed, we still crave human connection because human beings are social animals. That is true.
We always like to start our interview by asking our guests what's their growing up story. So I think I would like to ask you, like, as you grew up, was like entertainment or like theatre always part of what you were interested in? Because I saw that your first few jobs were like brand building, and then you were in MediaCorp for a while.
Yeah, I think theatre has always been, or media has always been part of my life. I think just growing up, just to set the context, because I'm 50 years old, so it kind of gives you the context. And it helped that I grew up in an entertainment family, right? My brother is Chen, my sister-in-law is Xiang Yun. So just growing up, I had the privilege of seeing that they were like icons of national television. Of course, when I was young, much younger then, I didn't understand the significance. But as I got older, I realized that, today, all of you, your generation, you understand platforms. All of you are content creators. You understand platforms. You have a telephone that a telephone is, or the mobile phone is a platform. But when we were growing up, these platforms were not accessible to many. So to have the ability to be on national media, whether it be radio or television, was a huge privilege. A lot of people longed to break the glass ceiling or glass wall and enter these, arenas. So I think growing up, I had that first-hand knowledge of what that's like, recognizing the privilege, also recognizing the power of communication. So I think I already had that growing up. So of course, when you grew up in this network, it was also easier for me to break into the space. I think that there is one luck of the draw, being born in a family that was already in entertainment and media. The other was, to your point, storytelling. I realized that we all want stories, right? Whether you are a KopiBros podcaster or Zap Peng seller, right? Or a minister talking about national solidarity, or a president, right? Informing the world of global events. What links all of these are narratives. So I always realized that act of communication has always fascinated me. So in time, it grew into communicating, whether in the education space, because I also have a PhD and I'm an educator, but also in the theatre and media space, because I realized that back then, especially in the 80s and 90s when I was growing up, the theatre became a very powerful space. The theatre was back then like the equivalent of our social media, right? Because back then, no social media, right? So theatre became the place where you can tell stories like 阴道独白, vagina monologues. I could questions or plays or issues that I wanted to raise in mass media, I couldn't always raise in mass media. So in mass, and because I was what they call bilingual, I understood mass media communication. I also understood fringe media communication. Questions that ran well with our national rhetoric, right? I could always go on national media, whether on television or radio, and I had a platform. But other questions such as like on LGBTQIA issues, or perhaps even on women's issues, or even on raising issues like, let's just say, an underage marriage or abortion, or things that would ruffle feathers, whether from a religious perspective or from a social political perspective. A lot of these plays, in fact, if you look into my repertoire of plays, everything from What the Butler Saw, which was on mental health and wellness and income inequities. Vagina Monologues was really on, the standing of women. And of course, we have progressed since then, but then really raising a lot of issues on like single moms, on, abortion, on rape, on transgender. There's so many issues that I raise in Vagina Monologues, or even in plays, big scale plays like Victor Victoria, where I really raise the issue of like ageism, where does ageism play? So these issues back then I realized theatre was a better arena. But eventually that led me into recognizing that different platforms suited different contexts. So I also went into live events, storytelling, and then of course book writing, right? I think that became a natural brand extension for me. But I'll say the one thing that I really jumped into was like this social media content creator. I see a lot of you have become so proficient in that. So I'm always trying to learn from all of you.
I wasn't born to do this, but it just came as it came with just a few friends just talking cock. Then okay, it's time to invite external guests. And then I started enjoying actually everybody has an interesting story. I talked to someone that cleans up dead people's houses. I'm planning to approach a debt collecting company. I'm always interested to hear what's the story behind all this. Yeah.
No, you're right. It's just like when I write my books, a lot of my books tend to be on women and leadership. I find a beat, right? As you find a beat in yours. So I found a beat is women and leadership. And then when I wrote this book called Mothers, it was interesting because it allowed. So obviously, the book writing, just like your podcast, allowed me to speak to like literally our president, right? To President Obama's sister, to like a variety of different people, to senators, to Olympians and athletes. But it also allowed me to reach out to rape survivor victims, to incarcerated mothers, to special needs moms. But, to your point, it is true. I think once you find these valuable stories, and we all want to stay connected. So, yeah, you're right. These platforms, whether it's a book or podcast, it allows us the ability to reach out to a very diverse group of people.
Understand.
Yeah.
I think my next question will be your experience as a producer host for MediaCorp and Lush 1995. So, could you share with our listeners how the experience was and how you look back upon this time?
Wow, yes. This would really date me, but this is such a great question because it allows me to tell you what it was back then. So back then, today, you have different challenges, right? But today you can literally just at the privacy of your home as you are, you're probably in your pajamas, right?
Yes.
And you right? And then you can just air this from the comfort of your home and it beams out to your audience. But back then, getting to radio first meant that you need to audition, you need to sound a certain way because it was, today you can go online, talk like that, right? We're very casual, like with KopiBros, like that also can. But back then there was a mold. So you had to speak good English or good Mandarin or good Malay, depending on the channel. And they would train you. See, once I go into that memory, I feel I have to enunciate very well and very clearly because we'd literally have our trainer have us read our scripts, our newscast. And so we read our scripts out. Of course, you have to be chatty. So they want to see that you have a depth of expression and different vocabulary and use of your voice. So you should be able to read the news. And must be able to and now Taylor Swift or whatever, right? Like you'll be able to read the weather. But more importantly, your enunciation had to be clear. And so what we would do, or our trainer would have us do, is to have us read, or she would record our session, and we have to painstakingly listen to ourselves. And she would say, mind your consonants, your T, your D, croissants. You have to hear the T, you have to see you have to hear the S. So KopiBros podcast. So you have to be able to hear all of that and be very clear and crisp in how you're speaking. So there's a standard that we had to adhere to. It is very good training because today I think I can be my usual, talk self with you, right? And very wenxian, but then you also had a more special register that you would use when you're on radio. And the landscape back then was also, I would like to think, a little more codified in that because there were big institutions governing these spaces, you had to look a certain way, act a certain way, sound a certain way. Today, there's obviously more diversity and more room for growth. But I will say the theatre space back then was very colourful because the theatre space were filled with people. And again, I'm saying this now because I'm dating myself and I haven't been in the theatre space in Singapore for a long time now. But back then, we had a lot of people that really wanted to make a difference. We literally had bankers, lawyers, professors, media professionals joining the theatre space because the theatre space became almost like a third culture space where we wanted ourselves to be heard, to express. Like I told you, mainstream media had very codified messaging. So this became like an interesting fringy way for a lot of us to get together. Like I'll say, kind of like how for you folks now, you find your niche in your social media or your streaming groups or your digital groups. But back then, it was a physical space. So after all our media rehearsals, we would meet under very specific places. I remember back then it was S11 near the National Library. It was under a tree. Then we were all like grouped there. It was very, it was face to face. Like people would meet physically, so you had certain hubs that we'll go to. The media spaces also tended to be a little bit more, of course, there's always overlaps. It was more segregated in the sense that you had television, you had radio, you had theatre. And of course, some of us would sort of, do all three, like Vanetta, for example. I'll say, hey, I literally went to a house and said, please come and act for me for my theatre. And I pulled her to theatre, or, then she does TV, right? So there is some co-mingling. But today, I would say it's so much more fluid.
Yes.
Everyone is just so much more fluid. But I'll say the very interesting thing in terms of media is audience. Because back then, when you were television icon or radio icon, I think I hearkened that in my opening conversation with you. Most people would know you. They would either recognize your voice, like, oh, this is Vanetta Lopez, or this is, Brian Richmond, or this is Loretta Chen on Lush 99.5, because we hear it all the time. Or you always see, Xiang Yun from Uso Nanyang, right? So But right, that you had mass cultural influences, or even growing up, we will toss out things like Lionel Richie, or Michael Jackson, or Madonna, and we kind of have the same references because pop culture or culture held us together, whether you're from Singapore or London or New York, right? Or you had similar references. But today, the media landscape is so diverse. My 24-year-old niece, who's damn hip now, will say, well, there's so and so that's damn popular, and I'll be like, huh? Who is this icon? And she'll be like, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, huh? Who is this? She's like, what? This person has 200 million followers, and it's like, I wouldn't even have heard of this person, right? Because it just shows you the landscape is now so diverse. Like back then, my brother, who's, Chit, who's 14 years older than me, him and I will listen to the same like Wang Chong music, or the same Lionel Richie, or the same, Tears for Fears. But today, my niece and I will, it's very diverse because she has a niche audience group, and her role models, icons, influencers are so different. So I would say the landscape has proliferated and just really become very, very niche. And when we mean niche, it doesn't mean small. It can be niche and big. It's niche and mass. It's a very mass niche audience. So it's really interesting.
Besides your experience in media and in theatre, right, I'm particularly interested when I look through your LinkedIn profile, and you're a vital part of growth in many companies like the Activation Group and 360 Productions. So I wanted to touch more on the Activation Group because of the clientele and the scope of work. I wanted to ask you, like, how do you end up like co-founding this group, and what problem were you trying to solve in the market then?
Yeah, I think I was co-founders with my brother. So I think a lot of it was also because, I'm my brother's sister. So I think I naturally really wanted to help him in his business. He was a very brick and mortars guy. He literally built with his hands. In fact, he even lost 3 fingers in an accident. But, he's recovered from, not Edmund, another brother, Eric. But aside from that, I think, again, just to put it in context, because our business really developed in a time where social media was not yet a big part of the landscape. So I think what happened was that audiences then were really craving new experiences, the way a lot of audiences now crave novel, streaming, podcasting experiences. So back then, they really wanted to have live experiences. Between television and radio, no one was really doing live experiences. Today, we talk about the experiential world. But back then, I saw an opportunity in that because I was a theatre person, remember? So I saw, why can't I take my theatre skills into brands? So back then, it was, if you were a brand, you had either your campaign would consist of print ads, radio, or television ads. So I sought to take some of my theatrical skills to say, hey, can we create something theatrical? So I remembered, I approached DBS, and we created a big musical for them. I also approached our brands like LVMH, right? And we turned, because LVMH also owned DFS, and we helped to build a lot of the retail stores in the airport arena. So one of the landmark things that we did was to say, hey, we have a captive audience in the airport, literally, right before you fly off, right? You typically are a little bit more well-heeled. You had some money, you had some time to spend, usually anywhere between 2 to 3 hours, because you're a captive audience in the airport. We were the first to propose, why don't we turn some of these brands that we had, because a lot of them were like alcoholic brands. And what's the best thing to do before you fly? Have a little cocktail, right? So short of people going to a bar to buy a cocktail, we said, hey, DFS, why don't we create these little mini cocktail arenas within your store? It's like a testing bar, but we turn it into an experience for visitors. So you could, so we worked with, for example, like Absolute Vodka, and we created handcrafted cocktails for them for free. But it's like a tasting experience. So today it's commonplace. But back then there was a lot of regulation that we had to work with, because you're getting people to consume alcohol in the airport arena. So now I can talk about it because now it's quite common. But back then we worked through a lot of paperwork, regulation, a lot of red tape to get things like that. But basically, it was experiences that we realized people craved, right? Because even before you buy something, you want to taste it, you want to smell it, you want to eat it, you want to drink it. So we realized that the experiential economy was huge. I did not have the vocabulary then, but I knew through my theatre experience that people loved being touched, not just physically, but metaphorically, and to have this connection. So I think that was something that I did for Activation Group that really took off, which was the idea of bringing live events and experiential encounters into the brand marketing space. And with that, I think we were It was a function of timing and velocity, and we're able to grow the company to what it was. At one point, we had about 150 staff. Yeah.
So what would you say is the biggest challenge in like building a company and scaling it at such a like fast level? Because some companies, they take many, many years just to go from like 2 staff to like 4 or 6.
Yeah, it's always hard, and to your point, right? It's always managing people, right? Because everyone is different. Everyone has a different histories. They come to work with different stories, right? And so I think managing. So when you begin to manage that scale of staff too, you also begin to realize that you do need HR departments. I mean, one of the challenges was keeping it homey. Wanting to have that 家乡 feel, but as you grew, you also need to have departments. You needed to have department heads. You needed to be a little bit more compartmentalized. So it was always a challenge about wanting to feel like a small family-run business, but having to navigate the challenges of scale. So I would say that is in itself one of the biggest challenges. And of course, also family-run businesses that scale often always have complications, right? So I mean, it's quite public now, so I can talk about it. So my brother, my sister-in-law also, not Edmund and Xiang Yun, but my other brother, Eric, and his other, and his partner also, separated in the course of the scale. So, I would say challenges are part and parcel once you become an entrepreneur. I wouldn't give it up for anything else, because it's also where you learn grit and resilience and all the things that we value and we talk about. Yeah, but it is challenging. Managing people is actually always the most challenging.
My first job was just managing volunteers, and already I want to vomit already, because most of the time I don't feel like I'm even managing them. I'm just like waiting for fire to happen and just putting out fire. Then I'm like, I'm not even like doing anything valuable here. I'm just like putting out fire. I feel more like a firefighter than trying to push this forward. I think you eventually put a close to that chapter and you move on to the academia where you become a professor, you started teaching. So I wanted to ask you, like, what prompted the move, and, was it something that you always like doing, like teaching and talking to students?
Actually, I want to clarify that. I did that all together. So I was one of those people that before the word multi-hyphenate was invented, I guess I was that.
Yes.
So I was one of those that after I got my PhD, I thought I was going to be a professor, but my dad had cancer. So I left UCLA and I came back to Singapore. And then I joined my brother's company, the Activation Group. But I did pretty much 3 things all at once. So I helped him at the Activation Group, continued to teach as an adjunct professor. And I started my media career. So I started directing. I had my own radio show. I was on the media quite a bit. Also, I think, Singapore provided you that perfect landscape, because we're a fairly small country. It's quite quick to get from place to place.
Travel around,
people. Yeah. In Hawaii, it's just going to get from place to place. It's already an hour or 2. Sometimes in the bigger cities, right? It's already a whole day. So, but to your point, I was able to navigate these 3 careers in academia, in entrepreneurship, as well as in media for the 15 years that I was in Singapore. I mean, I was always in and out of Singapore. I was in Canada, I was in Toronto, I was in Bhutan, I was traveling Korea, Japan, I was traveling a lot. But for a good 15 years, I actually navigated all 3 of this part of my life. Always enjoyed teaching, because teaching was, to me, just like an extension of communicating. I always thought that there were 3 things that I could potentially do. One is to be a pastor, one is to be a politician, the other is to be a lawyer, or to be an educator and entrepreneur. I obviously became the latter 2. The reason why I figured I can't be a pastor is because I didn't just want to tell people that there's just one way of being. There's only one way of looking at the world. I figured, okay, cannot. And then politician, I thought, cannot lah. Must don't say tell lies, but like must navigate a lot of narratives all at once for votes or for special interests, and a lot of navigating to do. In my younger years, I thought that being a lawyer, I was very simple then. I thought being a lawyer meant that, what about to defend a pedophile or defend a rapist? But of course, now I know that there are different kinds of law that I can get into. But back then I said, no. I guess being an entrepreneur and educator appealed to me because it allowed me to empower people with tools of thinking and tools of creating. But I've always enjoyed education. So regardless of how busy I am, I always want to teach a class or 2, because I feel that working as student students is very altruistic, and you really get to see the world through their eyes, and they fill me with a lot of ideas as well. So I've always loved academic work, and it's very intellectually stimulating.
I think talking about entrepreneurship, we can move on to the next part, which is, I think, your most recent venture, Smobler. Instead of me introducing the company, right, could you first introduce Smobler to our listeners?
Sure. Keep it simple. So Smobler is a frontier tech lab, and we work at the intersection of AI, blockchain, and immersive educational gaming. So we have 3 verticals. So educational gaming for youth and community. So for example, we are building a financial literacy game. We've also built a game based on the life and legacy of Lee Kuan Yew.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, you should look into some of the games we've built. We're like in talks with different national agencies to create games to fit our different campaigns. So yes, so we have the education gaming arm. We also have a blockchain infrastructure arm where we're building it for maritime trade. Specifically just for trade transparency in the open sea, especially for the refueling of ships in the open sea. We wanted to put that process on chain. So we've been funded by Miston Labs and the SWE Foundation. And then our final arm is our AI arm, where we built food AI systems for regulatory compliance. So we built one for the state of Hawaii to help get food entrepreneurs to go to market quicker. And now we are trying to build one for Singapore as well, to help with things like halal certification, as well as the ease of like just cross-border import and exports of food, because food is a national food security issue. So basically, we're really trying to look into places where technology can play vital roles, whether it be in education, in trade, and in food security. Yeah, so our mission is really, in short, right, it's based off our ideals: inclusion, diversity, equity, access, love, and sustainability, but really to use technology in what I call like a new trust economy, which you rightfully pointed out.
And I wanted to ask you, like, could you share more about the Nova 2025, which is the SG60 edition, which I think you covered last year?
Yeah, so Nova is actually an event that we create every year to bring all our partners together. So when we came out of COVID, I realized that people were all really eager to gather. So I created a mini event, because there were some very, very big tech events, but some of these very big tech events were kind of alienating, right? If you don't know people, you can feel a bit alienated. And so I created Nova to legacy players together, emerging tech players together. And so last year's one was our landmark one, because it was sponsored by the New York Stock Exchange. And we brought the New York Stock Exchange to come, and because it was the 60th year, I don't know whether you can show photos later, but because it was 60th year, we actually managed to light up the entire 11 Wall Street New York Stock Exchange with our Singapore flag, as well as our Nova logo. So it's really, really landmark to have been able to do that as a small Singapore startup. We actually were able to foster, again, back to our starting point about creating connections and communication and storytelling, able to foster the I suppose, camaraderie to actually celebrate Singapore's 60th anniversary together with the New York Stock Exchange. And that was something that we did at Smobler. So I'm really, really proud of that. That is really quite a milestone.
Wow.
So that's what we did for Nova.
So that was when I saw on Instagram where you took a picture under the place that they announced.
Oh, the bell. Yeah, the opening bell, the closing bell,
correct.
Or whenever they go IPO, yes, exactly.
Yes. I was thinking like, wow, Smobler is listed. Then I read the subtext, I'm like, oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, but not to say we are not considering, but it's a long process. But I would say that the opportunity to be there to work the New York Stock Exchange folks really opened my eyes up, and it is a process that we are considering. But at this point, we are focused on scaling and then building all our 3 ventures. But yes, it's always at the back of my head.
Okay, maybe the financial literacy game that you can that you just spoke about. Maybe you can give our viewers some context of what is it about, and how does Smobler come in to make it like accessible or like more fun for people that use it?
Sure. For that game in particular, that idea came about because I realized that when I was teaching a lot of my students, I realized that some of them did not even have basic financial literacy skills, but yet they're always on their phones playing games. So I thought one of the ways to actually get them to be more invested and interested in their own financial literacy is to create a financial literacy game. So very specifically, this game that we created was inspired by the idea of building a dream. Because if you tell people, to go and play a financial literacy game. They rather go and play some, Grow a Garden or League of Legends or, Grand Theft Auto. But get them to imagine, like, what is your dream to get you to achieve a dream. So in this particular game, because it was, we created it together with this company called Prosperous Kids based in the US. Basically, it's a physician-led organization, and what they want to do is also to inspire kids with financial literacy through their books. So we partnered, so we used their characters, Mimi. So the idea of like Mimi who wants to actually have a dog, but in order to have a dog, she needs money, she needs to, gain access to all this to get her dog. So basically our game, we create all these what we call obby or obstacle courses. So Mimi has to go through all these little obbies, or it could be Jin Yong, right? Depending on your avatar. Your avatar will go through all these little obstacles. You make some money, then you have a decision. You can go to the bank, you can invest, you can donate, you can go to the pound, or you could, do dog walking to make more money. But basically, we give you all these choices, life choices that you can do with the money. We give you choices on how to earn money, how to spend money, how to save money, how to invest money. And in the end, hopefully you achieve your dream of like getting that puppy, right? Because Mimi's dream, or in this game, the dream was to get that puppy. So then what we do is we try to create, risk and reward, but also to create a narrative that young people can feel like, oh, I can identify with this, right? Because if you get someone to go into the game and you make it seem like, as if like 上课, to be very bored. So you need to create something that appeals to these younger individuals, right? But then through the obstacle course and playing with other people, because when you see someone getting a puppy, then you also want a puppy, or you see someone while making money from dog walking, then you want to join in as well. So we also do put in some child psychology or psychology, in that we realize that peer pressure is real. So we turn that into a positive force for good, instead of always saying like peer pressure is bad, right? But we realize that if you get young people together to do something good, we want to build on this force of community.
Momentum.
But they now want momentum. They get together to do good things. So, let's all volunteer at the doggy shelter together, or let's volunteer to do dog walking so we can do something good. So begin to realize that every little choice that they make can have an impact.
Okay, so I think we covered the first of the three pipelines of Smobler. I want to touch on the third, which is the food AI thing. And it is that you have this system called the Nutra, which is the Smobler's food AI operating system. So could I invite you to introduce this system as well?
Yeah, thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity. So it really started with a very basic conversation I had here in the state of Hawaii. All our food is imported in Hawaii. And so we have obviously food security is a national security issue. And so, I won't inundate you too much of the backstory, but suffice to say there's a facility here that helps food entrepreneurs go to market. But there are still some stumbling blocks. And those stumbling blocks include, having to work with regulatory compliance. And because when you create food and people are ingesting it, there's going to be a lot of compliance. You need to know the health and hazard critical checkpoints. You need to know what are potentially things that can go wrong, because the entrepreneur has to mitigate that. So you need a very strict risk mitigation plan. You need to understand the nutritional and food labeling processes. You also need to understand the compliance regulatory processes, and you have to work with the department officials. So all of this typically tend to hamper the entrepreneurs, because every entrepreneur very eager, they want to chong, they want to create, they want to go to market. But all these regulatory processes can hamper them, and it also sets them back at least $15,000 per SKU, per item. So we decided that we would create an AI platform that helps them with nutritional labeling, also helps them with all the regulatory compliance. So you literally input your prompts in there, and our AI will give you nutritional labeling, and it'll also give you all the drafts for your compliance filing. And then after that, it makes it faster. So that's what we already built. But then, of course, being an entrepreneur, I started thinking, Hawaii can't be the only person that has this issue. So I brought it back to Singapore, and we realized that yes, Singapore too, we're an island, we're food security, it is an issue. So right now I'm actually in the midst of working with one of the biggest food services company in Singapore, and in the midst of trying to see how we could actually partner to create an AI platform powered by food, right? So that we can be able to house all of these regulatory compliance, be able to help with, invoice processing, able to help with the import, exporting, because all of this takes a lot of paperwork, able to help with like halal certification. So there are many, many things in a food industry that are very compartmentalized, and there are many, many different players. But actually, we do see a possibility and a prospect of being able to align some of these overlap, because a lot of players are just overlapping and doing a lot of busy work. So if we can actually create a unified platform, that would be key. So we see opportunities, and so that's what we are actively working on right now.
I think you spoke about the new trust economy. So I thought it's a very fresh concept, and I wanted to ask you, like, how do you define the new trust economy, and what do you think is important in this like client landscape?
Yeah, I think trust is always important, right? I mean, just from people to people, I trust you, I commented this podcast, it's an implicit trust. I think trust is the bedrock and foundation of all relationships, in a marriage, in a business. In a digital landscape, we need that even more. How do you know if it's fake news? How do you know if it's real, right? So the digital landscape is moving really fast. So the new trust economy is really about building systems that we can rely on, that you have transparency built in, where data integrity is protected, that all our communities will benefit from innovation. And so this is where I think the blockchain space can come in, because it's like an open ledger, and the data is encrypted, and then you cannot modify that without people knowing. So that's one of the reasons why I'm working with Mr. Naps and Sui Foundation to create this platform for digital bunker. So that's one. And we're obviously hoping to expand that into what we're doing in food security as well. But basically, I think the whole point is that technology has advanced so quickly, but there are also technological advances that allow us to encrypt or embed trust, literally in digital systems. And so that is an arena that I'm hugely interested in and actively working on.
I never saw it from the perspective that, it's actually like you're building trust in between businesses, and then everyone can operate on the same basis. Yeah.
I just give you a very like layman's example. Let's say I sell you something to eat and drink. How do you know that that thing is consumable? Because fundamentally you trust that, it's KopiBros brand, so it's Yakun coffee, so you drink it because you trust the brand.
Yep.
But from the time it was, say, harvested, let's not say coffee, let's just say something like seafood. I mean, how do you know from the time that it is farmed to the time when it's, say, refrigerated, right, or warehoused, to the time when it's shipped to you? How do you know if all that processes were adhered to? Because if you think about, say, something like seafood, the temperature is really important, right? When we think about something like milk, the refrigeration is very important, right? So all of these things, if you think about it, we don't think about it because as consumers, we just pay and then we consume. But all these processes, there are people and the intermediaries and there are companies that are in charge of all these processes. And at each checkpoint, we need to ensure that all the proper health and securities and hazard checkpoints are all met, right? Because otherwise, I could potentially give you milk that is expired, overdue, spoilt in the process, right? And you're drinking that. So again, trust is inbuilt in all of this, actually. Yeah, so now if there's a way for us to digitize that and minimize all the human elements in there. But of course, in the meantime, we're not saying we're getting rid of people. That's not our point. But we just want to be able to automate, because you still need people, right? I don't want people to say, oh my God, we're losing all our jobs. That's not the point. But we want to be able to enable and embed trust in all these checkpoints so that the human being can actually do more creative and interesting things, right? And be able to oversee with greater expediency with the use of, say, blockchain or AI technology.
So before we even get to the advice, right, I think you as a person, just now we spoke a bit about how you are a mother to a lot of fur babies. I don't know whether it's cats or dogs or like even rabbits. But what do you like to do when you're not like so busy among all these different 斜杠人生 or 斜杠 things that you do?
斜杠. Is it a better way of saying 斜杠 or 斜杠? Is it?
Hey, I never saw it that way before, but that's a China way of describing. Yeah, the China way call it 斜杠 because it's like slash.
斜杠. Wow, I learn new things every day. Okay. So I think one, being able to have conversations like this, conversations are really important. Just hanging out with friends. I just, came back from a lunch appointment. But that's it. Movement to me is medicine. I can actually even tell you that since February 7, 2025, I've been exercising every single day. I made it a commitment. And I have not stopped. Yeah. Today is March 7 here in Hawaii. I know it's March 8 in Singapore. Oh, happy International Women's Day.
Yes. Yes, yes.
So it's literally been 13 months that I've been moving nonstop. Movement is really important. I really enjoy my fitness training. It's really changed the way I look at life. I've always been athletic since I was young, but I stopped for a while because I had injuries and, I was recuperating. But now my daily dose of F45 HIIT workouts, doing bar workouts, doing my yoga, walks, strength training, all of this is really great to, build your self-confidence, but also beyond that, I mean, just it releases, endorphins, dopamines, right? All the things that make us feel good hormonally anyway. So a big advocate for movement. And then the other is really relaxation, right? Whether it's with your pets or going by the ocean, which I do, or doing something that you love, having a conversation with a loved one. I think mental wellness and movement, those are the two things that I hugely advocate.
Yeah, I can't say I speak the same for exercise because I exercise so that I can eat. So it's a different motivation for me.
Same. Yeah. But hey, maybe because I'm in my 50s now, so it's like I have to exercise to build muscle. So yeah, but yes.
Okay, then looking back at all your successes and all the business you built, right? What do you think is like a key factor for success?
Definitely resilience. I think I get asked this a lot. I've even given talks on, how to turn adversity into opportunity. Definitely resilience. But beyond that, I would say that if I have to put it in levels, the first is to have gratitude. Why gratitude? Because, I mean, to your point, let's just say what you just said, right? Because you were diagnosed with high blood pressure, then you decide to make a healthy change. But you're first and foremost grateful for the fact that you still have this body, so you decide to make a change, right? Because you can say, I have high blood pressure, I just, to heck with it, I just throw caution to the wind, I don't care any, just, Yeah, but I think when you have gratitude for anything that you have, it gives you a sense of not just recognition for the role that you play in your life, but also in people's lives. But it also makes you, so for example, today you and I are doing a podcast. But conversely, you and I could be burying our daughters in Iran today, right? We could be in Gaza, or every time I look at my nurse / helper at home in Singapore, she's from Myanmar. She came to Singapore because of the war in Myanmar. Right? So, you and I may not be podcasting today. Right? You and I could be, in a war-torn environment. So I think basic is to have gratitude for what we have, and it makes you feel this sense of, well, I better do more because this world is not just about me, and yet I also have a part to play in making things better. So I think the first step to have with anything or any kind of 悟道 or self-awareness is to have gratitude. And once you have gratitude, I think you begin to have a sense of resilience, because you say there's always someone better than you, and then you can envy them, or you can be grateful that there's also a lot of people that's worse off than you, right?
Yeah.
And then you begin to have a sense of resilience that I can do this, right? Let me go to the gym 3 times a day. And then you have a sense of humor, right? That you can laugh about it and say, wow, damn difficult lah. But at least I get to eat my takoyaki after that, right?
Yeah.
I think these 3 things are really important. You must have a sense of gratitude, you must have resilience, and you must have humor, because there'll be so many things that can make us unhappy and we say, well, my life sucks lah, everything very tam lah, right?
Yeah.
But I always say there's always someone else that's worse than you. So always be grateful for what we have. Yeah.
Yeah. I call this perspective and how to say that framing things in a different way, lah, right? I mean, same things, but you look at it from different perspectives is very different.
Exactly.
Yeah. What advice would you give to people thinking about starting their own businesses?
Start before you feel ready, because I don't think you'll ever feel ready, right? I think just like you, when you start a podcast, it's like, do you know anything? No, but you just started.
No.
So I think just start. Be grateful, be resilient. Have a sense of humor, forgive yourself if you don't like it, start again, retry. Don't be too hard on yourself. A lot of people spend their time waiting and spend their time twiddling their thumbs, or spend their time commenting on other people who fail, or commenting on other people who, all that time that you spend commenting on other people or commenting on yourself, if you just spend that time doing the thing, you actually get more success than if you just sort of sat around and waiting it for it to either fall from the sky or commenting about other people. I think if you have an intention, just do it. Yeah, I mean, with intention and some sort of plan, you know, I mean, and as you grow, you just become more mindful and thoughtful and bring interesting people smarter than you know, to help you out in your adventures as well.
What are some of the key principles that people should look out for in a business? I mean, besides cash flow, cash flow is like everything, but
yeah,
besides
cash flow is king, right?
Yeah.
Integrity. I mean, we talk about trust a lot, but I think integrity is really everything. If you're not good in your work, then why should people do business with you? So I think being principled and having integrity is really important. And people talk, right? So they may disagree with you, but they will say, okay, I've got to give it to him or her that at least him or her has principles or has integrity. Being adaptable is really key in business. You need to pivot. You need to be nimble. You need to see opportunity. You need to know when to start, when to stop, and have no ego. And that's difficult because we all have it, right? Sometimes I kick myself in like holding on to somebody or some project for too long, right? So being adaptable is really important. And then I think really having a deep sense of purpose, because on any given day, you can tell yourself, I just give up, right? Just go and work for someone else, do something easier, right? But there's some things that we do that's beyond money. So sometimes it's really purpose. So I would say having integrity, being adaptable, and having a strong, deep sense of purpose is really key.
Yeah, I definitely identify with the integrity part, because for me, it's more of like how people speak of you. I mean, you can be powerful and like restrict how people look at you, but how people speak of you in like out of the public eye and out of whatever, this kind of thing very hard to control. So unless inside you're a good person, people can feel that.
Because they might even say like, oh yeah, you know, so and so is very nice, but okay, maybe not so good in this, but very nice, you know, like or very principled, but maybe shouldn't sell char kway teow, maybe should sell hor fun, you know, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, fundamentally character is king because people still judge you by your character.
Exactly.
I agree.
So we would like to end with a round of quick fire question. Yes, the first question I want to ask is a book you think everyone should read besides your own. I mean, your own book definitely need to read.
I was going to say read all of my books, right? Then I'll say maybe Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I think that's meaningful and philosophical.
Okay,
yeah. Otherwise, another one that I like is Pema Chodron that is about, I think, comfort and discomfort, something like that. That, you know, always tells you about resilience. But yeah, Viktor Frankl or Pema Chodron.
Dog or cat person?
Well, very hard, but it's cats lah, because I have 16 here. If I don't say them, then they later meow me, right? So
they can feel it.
So of course they'll meow me later. So I have to say my cats. But I've always loved all pets, but now cats.
Favorite music?
Jazz.
Oh, okay.
That's also one of the reasons why I brought the biggest jazz musician in Holland, Laura Fiji, to Singapore to star in my musical. Yeah, I was a huge jazz fan. Jazz fan.
Most surreal moment in your career so far?
Oh, I think New York Stock Exchange, collaborating with them, working with them, seeing Singapore light up on the New York Stock Exchange, 11 Wall Street was phenomenal because knowing that we did that, like Smobler did that, you know.
AI in one word.
The future. Coming, headed your way.
Wow. One celebrity or one person that you haven't worked with that you want to work with?
Wow, that's a really good question. There's so many. Woo! But a dream personality doesn't have to be accomplishable, right? Okay,
Yes.
you all sure laugh at me because it dates me, but I'll say Madonna because I know people now her say, well, she grandmother lah, she retire lah, blah, blah, blah. But in the essence of Sampa Punijie, during my generation, she was phenomenal. She's managed to be the material girl, a trailblazer, you know, in the men's world. So that's a pipe dream, so still Madonna.
If you weren't doing any of this, what alternative life will you be living?
I think I'll still be living this life, but in the spirit of this activity, I will be running some animal sanctuary. Rescuing animals, rescuing farm animals. Because I've also started to cut down my meat consumption. Because I think that urban ways of farming are quite cruel. So I'll be running an animal sanctuary, rescuing all these farmed animals.
So that is your number 6, number 6 career lah. Out of the 5, the politician, lawyer, all this. That's your number 6.
Yes.
Okay, last question. One word your friends will use to describe you.
Effervescent.
Wow. Okay.
If they're English, good lah. Otherwise bold lah. or bold or daring or crazy lah. If those ang mo ho one, they say effervescent.
Okay, so Dr. Chen, it was such a pleasure talking to you. I think we can talk for another 1 hour, but I think we have to conclude the podcast somewhere. Just to close off our episode, can you let our audience know where they can find you online or on social media?
I really enjoyed myself doing truly, I really have. So on LinkedIn, please search for Dr. Loretta Chen, Chen. On Instagram, Dr. Loretta Chen, so Dr. Loretta Chen, Chen. Or just Google my company, Smobler, SMOBLER.io. Or just Google me, ChatGPT, Loretta Chen, Chen. But really happy to connect. And I really hope I get to be on your show again, Jin Yong. It's been super fun.
Oh, definitely we'll invite you back one because we are doing we're doing a second round of invitations for guests.
Retro.
Yeah, then we will do the Q&A. So we'll open it up, then our listeners can send in questions. Then we were like, okay, then we will after that we will like do a like maybe a few months down, then like, oh, so Dr. Chen is coming back. What questions you want to ask her, this kind of thing?
Oh, wow. If you ever need another female 三八妇女节 podcaster, I will join also. Yeah, like
sure.
your female counterpart. Kopi girls. Yeah.
Yes.
So just KopiBros, Kopi gals.